consolidate some of the lessons learned. And this time what we're going to do is create an application that is menu driven that will allow us to add a name, remove a name, find a name, or print all names that will be stored in a list. So here's our menu and here's main. So at this stage, as you can see here, what we're going to do is make the menu select an item, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is basically an option. So we're going to have, let's say, option, or you can call it choice if you want, will be equal to whatever we input from here. So we could something input like input, enter your choice, and then we'll have the function return choice. Okay? All right, so what is this function going to return exactly? Well, it will return a character 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is a string. So let's make it a number. Let's make it an int. Okay, you don't have to. You could leave it as a string if you want, but I want to make it a number, an actual number. We'll make it easier for us to do our if statement over here. Now, we would like to display this and keep it in a loop as long as we don't pick 5. So maybe we'll have a variable, just like we did with the calculator, and we'll make it prime to a value that will make the while loop condition true. So for that, we could do option equals 0. Okay, so I picked an integer value. We could do that. So while option, okay, let's say is not equal to 5, which means we don't want to exit, then stay in the loop. So what do we want to do? We want to call the menu. But if we call the menu, we want to assign the value of choice to option. So in other words, we're going to have to do option equals the function call menu. And this will allow us to, as long as we don't pick 5, we stay here. So let's test it out quickly. You can see here where now we get a list of items that we can pick. And let's say we pick 1. Notice the menu is back. 2, the menu is back. You can type anything other than 5 and the menu is back. Now if you type 5, then the program ends. So we have good control over the while loop for this particular stage. Other things we want to do, we want to validate the values that we pick between 1 and 5. If it's anything else, we would like to display maybe an error. So we could do something like this. If, and the option that we picked is less than 1 or greater than 5, then we would like to display an error. If option is less than 1, so let's say you typed 0, or you typed 6, right? Or, so we're using the OR operator as a logic operator. So either one of these have to be true. One of them have to be true. Both. You can't have both true in this case because you're going to pick one or the other. So OR is perfect for this kind of logic processing. Option is greater than 5. If this is true, print an error. Invalid choice, right? So I put an exclamation point there. Let's try it again. So let's run it and let's pick 0. And notice it says invalid choice. Great, let's pick 6. So it's out of range, right? So, and again, we get invalid choice. But if you pick 1, for example, you're not going to get that message. You just get the menu again. So this here, just for error checking to make sure that you're within 1 and 5. So if you're outside 1 and 5, that means there would be an error. Else, then you must be within. So let me exit here. So let me just type 5 to get out. So if we typed anything between 1 and 5, that means this condition here is false. We don't have an invalid choice. We do have a valid choice. So what can we do? We could do another if statement for evaluating the first one and then the second one, right? Or we could do so if we did this, for example, which we did with the calculator, if option equals 1, which means we intended it to be the addition, then we'll just say print, we can print a message for now, addition under construction. Nothing's going on. Or in our case, adding a record under construction. We're not doing anything other than, hey, we are validating that you picked 1. This is what you're seeing. Else, then you will do this. You will do a nested if statement. If option equals 2. Now, there's got to be a better way to do this than nested if statement. And the answer is yes, and I'll show you in a minute here. So let's just continue with this. Removing a record under construction. Okay. And else. So you have to be really careful where you put your else and ifs. We know this is going to be nested against this one. If option equals 3, then what you're intending to do is to find a record. So finding a record is under construction. Else, well, you're left with the last one, which is you've picked 4. Okay, so if option equals 4, then printing all records is under construction. And then lastly, else, well, might as well print goodbye because you've picked 5. By the time you're here, if 1, 2, 3, 4 were all false, so that means you picked 5 since we're within a range of between 1 and 5 anyway, right? So you must have picked 5 if you're here. You might as well say goodbye. All right, well, let's test it out quickly. Let's test out this logic here. We're going to run this, and we're going to pick 1. Adding a record under construction, we're going to pick 2. Removing a record under construction, great, let's pick 3. Finding a record is under construction, so these are simply placeholders right now, so I will do these operations later. So right now you're setting it up to make sure that you have the framework for this to work properly, so you're not dealing with a lot of details before you get the big picture. So 4 is good. How about if I pick 5? Notice it says goodbye and I'm out. Now let's run it again and let's pick a number other than what's in that range. Again, -1. You can see I get an invalid choice. Okay. But it's saying goodbye at the same time. Let's see why it's doing that. So that's a logical error. Everybody see that here. So something is wrong here. Maybe we need to be very specific, right? So maybe we need to be very specific. Is it 5? So because notice here, it's not within the range. Okay, so it's less than 1. So all of this should have been an else here. So all of this should have been under an else. And let's move all of this. Do you see why this could be very tricky and why we don't like it? So let's go ahead and put 5 here just to get out. And let's run it again. This time I'm going to go ahead and do a -1. Notice I'm not going to get that error. Excellent. I only get invalid choice, but I do not get goodbye. All right? So now let's go ahead and pick 5 and see if we get goodbye. Yep, no problem. So this would have been the proper structure if you're doing a nested else or a nested if statement. So, but you notice here, it's very easy, and we made that error right away, that you would forget an else here, and then everything else gets a little tricky. Is there a better way to handle this? Yes. Let me show you. elif, and then bring this here, and then do the same thing here. Notice here, it is really a shorthand, and notice the syntax here, elif. And I'm going to bring this one back here. So now we get to see how you could structure this in a much easier way, right? So elif, we're going to bring this one here. So there is such a keyword called elif, right? And notice now, even the tabbing process become easier. Oops, move forward here, right? And else for the last one, that's fine. Just bring it here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this again. Let's pick the wrong value, 0. And we get invalid choice and we remain in the loop. Let's pick 1. Let's say adding a record under construction. Let's pick 2. Removing a record under construction. Great. Let's pick 3. Let's pick 4. Okay. Let's pick -1 again. Invalid choice and nothing else. You don't get that goodbye. Only you're going to get the goodbye when you type 5. And you're out. This is much more compact, much easier. So if you learn anything in here for driving the logic, for instead of using nested if statements, which really technically this is a nested if statement, but this is an abbreviation and a much better shorthand, and handling multiple if statements, one inside the other, except for the last one. Okay, it's the else of this last if statement right here, which means none of this was true. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's got to be a 5. If you wanted, you could have done an elif 5 and then put an error message if you wanted to do something like that. So there's some slight variations you could use to make it slightly different. So this will work just fine. So in our next video, we're going to actually do these operations and complete the adding and removing and finding items. Heck, we'll even tell you how many instances of that item exist. So if you have 2 Kellys, we're going to get Kelly, and there were 2 instances of Kellys in the database. So we will start, and I'll show you how to create a list that is empty, and then we can populate the list, and then we can inspect it, remove things from it, and finding things in it. So that will be our next lesson. I will see you then.